Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports, where we like to consider ourselves the antidote to gaslighting. Now, we have a lot to get into today, but I wanted to talk quickly about our format change. We're going to be getting away from more scripted and edited videos into something a little more free-flowing, where hopefully we can get more content out and cover more topics. So leave a note in the comments and tell me what you think, if you like it or not. Now, here's the topics we're going to run down. We have the latest generic ballot numbers, a whole lot of stuff about illegal immigration, which is shaping up to be a really important topic this cycle. And finally, something you're not going to see anywhere else, numbers about Trump versus Michelle Obama. So you're going to want to stick through the whole video to see that. But first, I want to talk about a topic that's near and dear to our hearts, and that's the current state of journalism and where public opinion plays a role. Now, believe it or not, we're actually journalists. We report every day on what Americans are thinking. And like true journalists, we believe that the role of journalism is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Now, for most of our 20 years of history, we've been doing the same thing. Our model hasn't changed. We go out into the field every night, ask Americans questions, and then report the results to you. 20 years ago, we used to be on TV all the time, and we used to get many mentions in mainstream news media. I just did a quick search, and here's one from 2004. Believe it or not, it's Keith Olbermann on his show on MSNBC, just talking about Rasmussen Reports numbers and how you should go read them yourself. A lot's changed in 20 years, hasn't it? But in today's day and age, it seems like news media is more interested in telling you what to think as opposed to reporting on what America thinks. And I think that points out one of the biggest changes in the way that news media operates. A lot of them have brought polling in-house. And one of the leverages of censorship that they use is they can gatekeep what topics are asked about. Now, we don't gatekeep topics at all. You should come to us to see things about vaccine adverse effects, the weaponization of the federal government, and even reporting about the state of news media. And it's really bad. Here's a great example about how polling can be used as a gauge to measure the effectiveness of mainstream media hoaxes. In a campaign speech just earlier this week, Donald Trump used the word bloodbath. Now, anybody who watched the video, if you haven't seen it, you should go watch it for yourself. In a few seconds, it's blatantly clear. He's talking about people losing their jobs in the auto industry, but that's not what's being reported on mainstream corporate news. And so while we were in the field, we decided to take to Twitter and see what our Twitter followers thought. Now, this poll was picked up everywhere. It was actually retweeted by Scott Adams and then got a comment by Elon Musk himself. And so almost 600,000 people saw the poll, 20,000 people responded. And I think because of that, it represents a pretty good cross-section of Twitter users. And among Twitter users, Donald Trump said that it would be a bloodbath if he didn't win in November. Which is more likely, that he was talking about auto workers losing jobs or that he was talking about widespread political violence by his supporters? Only 3% of poll respondents on Twitter said that Donald Trump was talking about violence. Now, you should go to our website today because our final numbers are out. And believe it or not, 40% of the voting public, 40% of a 1,000-person likely voter sample said that Donald Trump was talking about political violence. So those people appear to be getting their news from mainstream media, or maybe they're just willing to believe anything bad about Donald Trump. But not coincidentally, in the same question set, we also found that now a record 60% of the electorate agree that the media is truly the enemy of the people. And that's pretty astounding. But let's get into the generic ballot. And for those who don't know, the generic ballot is a simple question that's used to gauge the relative positions of Republican versus Democrat congressional candidates in an election cycle. If the election for Congress were held today, would you vote for the Democrat candidate or the Republican candidate? Right now, 47% of the electorate would vote for the Republican candidate and only 41% the Democrat candidate. That gives Republicans a 6-point lead. That's a pretty strong and important lead. But if you follow politics, you know that as election season heats up, people become more politically engaged and more advertising dollars are spent. We expect that lead to tighten up. 2 years ago, at this same point in the midterm cycle, Republicans actually had an 11-point lead. But midterm cycles tend to be a little bit different than presidential cycles. Not as many people vote, and people are less politically engaged. What's also important to point out is Donald Trump seems to be doing better against Biden than Republicans are doing against Democrats. Now, here are the party numbers, and there's not a lot to say here, except that Republicans are winning really big with independent voters. 44% of independents say they would vote for a Republican candidate, and only 29% say the Democrat candidate, giving Republicans a 15-point lead among independents. If you compare Republican to Democrat numbers, you'll also see that Republicans have a 3% crossover advantage. 83% of Republicans say they would vote Republican, and only 80% of Democrats say they would vote Democrats. But let's get into our main topic, illegal immigration. Now, illegal immigration has been a problem for decades, people coming across the border and not following our immigration laws. But recently, it's become a really hot topic, with all of the many more people flooding over the border under Biden's term, to the point where likely voters actually think that Biden is purposely not following the law. Because of that, illegal immigration is now the number one issue among Republicans and the number two issue among all likely voters for this election cycle, taking second place only by a few points to the economy. Now, we've asked about this topic so many different ways, but there was a pretty interesting news hook last week at Biden's State of the Union address where he actually referred to illegals as undocumented migrants. And then he was corrected by Nancy Pelosi and forced to apologize. But we thought it would be a great time to see how Americans refer to these people. And here are the results. Which is the best way to describe foreigners who cross the U.S. border in violation of our immigration laws? 35% say illegal alien, 27% of voters say illegal immigrant, 12% of voters say asylum seeker, and 20% say undocumented migrant. Now, according to the political elites, that's the correct term to use. But it's interesting to me that 62% of all likely voters will use the word illegal when describing these people. And only 12% refer to them as asylum seekers, which is interesting since ostensibly that's the reason they're coming here in violation of our laws. Now, we'll take a look at the party numbers for this too. And among Republicans, 80% are willing to use the word illegal, and only 16% will use either asylum seeker or undocumented migrant. But look at Democrats. 43% of them will use the word illegal, and only 28% agree with Nancy Pelosi that undocumented migrant is the way to go. Independents are pretty much in the middle. Now, we didn't ask just one question. We asked a bunch of questions about illegal immigration. Does illegal immigration make the United States a better country or a worse country? 14% say better, but 56%, or 4 times more, say worse. 25% say it makes not much difference. Here again are the party numbers, and 76% of Republicans say that illegal immigration makes the country worse. 10% say better. And independents are a lot closer to Republicans on this. Only 8% of independents say illegal immigration makes the country better. 56% say worse. But the Democrat numbers are a little trickier to parse. Only 38% say illegal immigration makes the country worse, which is starkly different than Republicans. But only 22% go ahead and say that illegal immigration makes the country better. 34% say it makes not much difference, probably taking a cue from the president himself, who seems to be not too interested in solving the problem. It was recently reported that the Biden administration had a program of international flights that last year transported more than 300,000 illegal immigrants to U.S. airports. 10% of voters strongly approve of that program, 15% somewhat approve, making a total of 25% of likely voters approving of the program transporting illegal immigrants to U.S. cities. 14% somewhat disapprove, and 46% strongly disapprove, meaning that 60% of the electorate in aggregate disapprove of these flights. Again, to party, and not surprisingly, 84% of Republicans disapprove of these programs, and independents pretty much overwhelmingly disapprove as well. 59% disapprove, but only 23% of them approve. But look at Democrats. I like to call a signal like this cognitive dissonance. It looks like there's really no strong signal here, or better said, they just really don't know how to answer this question. And I can tell you from other questions we've asked, Democrats in general don't really favor illegal immigration. They just don't see it's that big of a deal. But in this question itself, we talk about the Biden administration doing something to further illegal immigration. And it kind of looks like it makes their brains sort of break a little bit. And taking a look at these numbers by Biden approval, I think shows a similar kind of signal, especially among Biden's strong approvers. Now, if you're not used to looking at numbers this way, what we're seeing is how people answered this question broken down by what they think about Biden. So on the left side, you see Biden's strong approvers. 30% of them strongly approved of the program transporting illegal immigrants to U.S. cities. That's a really small number for people who strongly approve of Biden at this point in his term. Very few of those people, only 15% actually would say that they were opposed to Biden's program, again, because they're bought into the Biden administration. But look at that not sure number. 31% of those people just had no idea how to answer this question. Now, of course, Biden's strong disapprovers are absolutely against this program. 87% disapprove of the program strongly, and 92% total disapprove. I think this kind of question also gives you a pretty good feel for how divisive Joe Biden is. Most people at this point in time have been given enough reason to either strongly approve or strongly disapprove of his presidency. So people at this point who say somewhat approve or somewhat disapprove tend to be less politically disconnected or just not have strong opinions. And when it comes to a question like this, that's why you see a lot of not sures and somewhat disapproves. It should be pretty clear cut if you agree with these flights or not. Now, again, I'm going to show you something that you're not going to see anywhere else. Other people do ask questions about illegal immigration, but a lot of times it's the bland pollster type questions like, how important of an issue is illegal immigration? But what about the great replacement theory? When Vivek talked about that during a campaign speech, I thought there was a major glitch in the matrix. Something slipped through that shouldn't have. But of course, we asked about it. How likely is it that some people are promoting mass immigration to the United States as part of a political agenda to replace the existing American population? 36% of U.S. likely voters said very likely, and 21% said somewhat likely, for a combined total of 57%, a strong majority of all U.S. likely voters, thinking that there is a political agenda to replace the existing American population. 14% said not very likely, and 19% said not at all likely, for a combined total of 33% saying it's not likely. There was so much clucking and pearl clutching when that slipped through the censors, but it's actually something that most likely voters think is a very real possibility. And here are the party numbers, also interesting to look at. 77% of Republicans think it's a likelihood, and only 17% say no. And Democrats, actually 42% of them think it's possible as well. But I think also what you're seeing maybe is a little bit of that cognitive dissonance signal here. But look at independents. 55% of independents think that it's likely that there is a political agenda to replace the existing population of the United States. And only 33% of them say not likely. Now, let's go into one more topic that I don't think anybody else has asked about, and that's Michelle Obama versus Donald Trump. But first, let's talk about Trump versus Biden. The last time we asked, Trump was up 6 points, which is significantly better than he was doing 4 years ago at the same time in the cycle. Just a month or two ago, people were talking about Biden's age and whether it was time to replace him. And then he had his State of the Union address, which seemed to be sufficient to cement Biden as the Democrat choice for the 2024 election. But before that happened, we went into the field because a lot of people were talking about other candidates that should step in, younger, fresher faces. Michelle Obama and Gavin Newsom. Now, it looks like they're running forward with Joe Biden right now, but wouldn't it be interesting to see how those two would fare against Donald Trump? For some reason, we seem to be the only ones who find that interesting. Now, you'll have to excuse the lack of fancy graphics here. I was just trying to get it all on one page. But here are the numbers. Once again, we pit Donald Trump against Joe Biden, and here Donald Trump's lead has increased to 8 points over Joe Biden. That puts him over 10 points better now than he was doing 4 years ago in these same polls. Now, another note, too, is that when you compare us to other pollsters on Real Clear Politics right now, we show Donald Trump with a bigger lead. One of the main reasons is because we always poll likely voters. To us, that's what matters. Right now, most other people in the industry are just polling registered voters. Why do they do that? Well, one reason is because it's cheaper. We actually ask Americans if they're likely to vote or not. And if they aren't, we don't use those results. Registered voters, you don't have to ask them that screen and then drop them out of the process. People who are registered to vote, but then say they don't often vote, are much more likely to say they'll vote for a Democrat candidate, which is the main reason people say that our polling gives Republicans a little bit more of an advantage. But sure enough, come election season, all of those pollsters are going to shift to likely voters as well, because that's what's accurate. Now, I put a pretty good chunk of the crosstabs up, and maybe you haven't seen these before. Pause the screen and try and figure it out if you'd like, but across the top is how each demographic answered the question. So if you go out to the right, you can see that among Republicans, Donald Trump is leading 85-11, but among Democrats, Joe Biden is only leading 76-18. But look at the independents. 45% of independents today say they would vote for Donald Trump, and only 33% of them say Joe Biden. That's a really low number. and it gives Donald Trump a 12-point lead among independent voters. But let's go to Gavin Newsom. He seems to be doing great in California, and people seem to love him out there. But against Donald Trump in a national 2024 election matchup, he's losing 51 to 34 points, or an astounding 17-point lead. That means he really is not viable as a candidate, at least at this point. He's got a lot of work to do on the national stage to build that image up. But everybody in the media always seems to talk about Michelle Obama as if she'd be a slam dunk if she would just somehow be convinced to run. And I never really saw that. The truth is, in this divisive climate, nobody really gets positive favorability numbers anymore. And believe it or not, right now, of all political people, Donald Trump has among the highest favorability. The truth is, in the last 10 or 20 years, the daytime TV crowd, which is where I think a lot of Michelle Obama's support lies, has just become less of a big deal. And here are the numbers to prove that. Against Donald Trump, Michelle Obama only does 1 point better than Joe Biden. Donald Trump would win against Michelle Obama right now, 50% to 43%. Now, of course, if she became the candidate, there would be a massive coronation and a lot of positive press. But I think it's fair to say that she is absolutely not a slam dunk candidate against Donald Trump. Independents would still go for Donald Trump by a narrower, but still pretty significant 8-point lead. And she only does 7 points better than Joe Biden among black voters, which is incredible. But let's go back to black voters there. Go up to the top row and look at Donald Trump versus Joe Biden among black voters. According to this, Donald Trump is only losing by 17 points, taking home 35% of the black vote. Now, Donald Trump does underperform the polls among that demographic, but still, if Donald Trump gets anywhere close to this, it would be cataclysmal for the Democrats. And Donald Trump's winning by 16 points among Hispanic and other race voters as well, which, again, is cataclysmal. You really have to wonder what's going on in the heads of Democrats right now. It seems like they have nothing better than Joe Biden. And if these numbers hold, he's going to lose. That's why I can't stress enough how important information is. The Bloodbath hoax perpetrated on the American people just this week has to be the clearest example about how free exchange of information jeopardizes mainstream media control over information. Again, just 3% of people on Twitter thought that Donald Trump was talking about violence, but 40% of the US voting public thinks that Donald Trump was talking about violence. Why? Where did they get that information? I humbly suggest that this election season, Rasmussen Reports can be your information warfare partner. We can measure the gaslighting. And keep you sane. Follow us at Rasmussen_poll on Twitter. Subscribe to our channels at YouTube or Rumble. And thanks for watching.